The Callahan Ranch has been in my family for 4 generations. 40 acres of rolling pastures, weathered fence posts, and open skies that stretch toward the horizon in every direction. My earliest memories are of running through tall grass, helping my grandfather tend to our horses, and falling asleep to the symphony of crickets and distant coyote calls. The land carries our history in every acre, every fence post hammered by my great-grandfather, every barn beam installed by my grandfather in his younger days. Grandpa Callahan, as everyone in the county calls him, is something of a local legend. At 75, his hands remain strong and calloused from decades of honest work. His eyes still carry the sharp intelligence that made him such a successful electrical engineer before he retired to run the ranch full-time. "Land is the only thing worth having," he would tell me. "They are not making any more of it." Our peaceful existence began changing 3 years ago. The rolling hills to our east were sold to a developer. I still remember the morning when the first bulldozers arrived, carving perfect squares into the natural landscape. Within months, rows of identical houses sprouted like mushrooms after rain. The Sycamore Heights development, 250 suburban homes with manicured lawns and identical mailboxes, now pressed against our eastern property line. The contrast could not be more striking. Our weathered ranch house, practical outbuildings, and natural pastures against their uniform structures and geometric landscaping. We hoped for peaceful coexistence. That hope died the day I found the first notice taped to our mailbox. "This is ridiculous," I said, handing the official-looking document to Grandpa as he sipped his morning coffee on the porch. "They are claiming our compost pile violates their community standards. We are not even part of their community." Grandpa adjusted his reading glasses, scanning the paper with growing disbelief. Section 4.3 of the Sycamore Heights HOA bylaws clearly prohibits unsightly waste disposal visible from community property. He looked up, his expression bemused. "Since when do they make rules for land they do not own?" More notices followed. Our tractor parked near the property line, violation. Our horses visible from their jogging path, violation. The storage shed that had stood for 40 years, violation. Each notice came with increasingly threatening language about community aesthetic standards and property value protection. We tried ignoring them at first, but then came Darren Winters. The Sycamore Heights HOA hired him as their dedicated community standards officer. His pressed khaki uniform and shiny badge might have been comical if he had not taken his self-appointed authority so seriously. I first encountered him photographing our equipment from the road. "Just documenting ongoing violations," he explained without a hint of embarrassment, his clipboard already filled with notes. His smile never reached his eyes. "The board will be reviewing these at the next meeting." "This is private property," I informed him. "We are not part of your HOA." "Community standards affect everyone," he replied smoothly. "The board believes your situation impacts property values for all Sycamore Heights residents." Grandpa started checking our perimeter more regularly after that encounter. It was during one of these inspections that we discovered the footprints. Fresh indentations in the soft earth near our eastern fence line, directly facing Sycamore Heights. Boot prints that matched no one who worked on our ranch. "Someone has been crossing over," Grandpa said, crouching to examine the disturbed section of fence. The wire had been pushed down, creating a makeshift step. His expression darkened as he ran his hand along the fence post, feeling for other signs of disturbance. Standing there in the golden afternoon light, watching my grandfather trace the evidence of trespassing with his weathered fingers, I felt something shift between our two worlds. The fence line that had always marked a simple boundary now represented something more significant, a line being deliberately crossed. "We will need to keep a closer eye on things," Grandpa said quietly, staring toward the neat rows of houses in the distance. There was something in his voice I had rarely heard before, a steely determination that suggested this intrusion would not go unchallenged. Some folks need to be reminded about respecting private property. I nodded, not yet understanding how significant this small violation would become, or the remarkable way my grandfather would eventually enforce that lesson. The manila envelope that arrived the following week contained what could only be described as an ultimatum. The Sycamore Heights Homeowners Association letterhead gleamed with official self-importance, topped with a stylized tree logo that somehow managed to look both pretentious and generic. "Dear neighboring property owner," the letter began. "Following multiple documented violations of community standards, the Sycamore Heights HOA Board has voted unanimously to require immediate remediation of conditions negatively impacting our development." I read the list of demands with growing disbelief. Remove all visible farm equipment. Relocate livestock to areas not visible from Sycamore Heights properties. Repaint all structures to conform with the approved color palette. Implement professional landscaping along the shared boundary. "They cannot be serious," I told Grandpa, spreading the papers across our kitchen table. "They have absolutely no authority here." Grandpa studied the document carefully, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "This is signed by Corinne Thompson, HOA president." He tapped the signature at the bottom of the page. "Says here they are holding a special meeting tomorrow evening to discuss boundary properties compliance issues. Might be worth attending." The Sycamore Heights Community Center looked exactly as I had imagined. Blindingly white walls, motivational posters, and a trophy case highlighting neighborhood achievements. Rows of metal folding chairs faced a long table where 5 board members sat with the serious expressions of people who believed they were conducting matters of grave importance. We took seats in the back row, conspicuous in our work jeans and boots among the business casual attire of the residents. Corinne Thompson, a woman with an immaculate blonde bob and a perpetual tight-lipped smile, called the meeting to order precisely at 7 o'clock. "Our first agenda item concerns ongoing discussions with adjacent property owners regarding community standards compliance," she announced. "As you know, our property values depend on consistency of appearance throughout the viewshed." Darren Winters stepped forward, clipboard in hand. He clicked through a slideshow of photos, our ranch viewed from various angles, with red circles highlighting supposed violations. "As you can see," he continued, "the eastern perimeter presents significant challenges to our community aesthetic. I have documented 17 distinct violations visible from Sycamore Heights properties." When Grandpa raised his hand to speak, the room fell silent. He stood slowly, his tall frame commanding attention despite his simple attire. "My name is Robert Callahan. That ranch you are displaying has been in my family for 70 years. I am afraid there has been some confusion. Our property is not part of your association and is not subject to your rules." Corinne Thompson's smile remained fixed, though her eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Callahan, while we understand your property is not technically within our jurisdiction, surely you can appreciate how your agricultural activities might affect the property values of our homeowners." "My agricultural activities," Grandpa replied evenly, "are fully compliant with county zoning regulations for agricultural land use, regulations that predate your development by many decades." Darren stepped forward, adjusting his badge. The board is prepared to take necessary actions to protect community interests, he said, including potential legal remedies if voluntary compliance cannot be achieved. The implied threat hung in the air. I studied Darren more carefully. The way he stood with his weight slightly forward, the barely concealed satisfaction in his expression. He enjoyed this power play. "We will take your concerns under advisement," Grandpa said finally, his tone making it clear the discussion was over. We walked out under the stares of dozens of homeowners, their expressions ranging from embarrassment to open hostility. 2 days later, reviewing our newly installed security camera footage, I discovered something disturbing. The recording clearly showed Darren Winters approaching our fence line after dark, flashlight in hand. After checking that no one was watching, he hoisted himself over our fence, walking several yards onto our property to photograph our equipment shed. "This changes everything," Grandpa said quietly as we watched the footage again. "That is not just harassment, that is criminal trespassing." We filed a complaint with the county sheriff the next morning, submitting the video evidence. The deputy took our statement but seemed reluctant to pursue the matter aggressively. "Technically, it is trespassing," she admitted, "but without damage to property, it will likely just be a warning." Whatever warning Darren received did nothing to deter him. If anything, his patrols along our boundary became more frequent and aggressive. He would stand just off our property, making notes and taking photos whenever we worked near the fence line. When we moved our horses to the eastern pasture, he photographed them as if documenting dangerous wildlife. "Your animals are unsettling the residents," he called out on afternoon. "The board is considering action regarding the odors and unsanitary conditions." Grandpa said nothing, but I could see something hardening in his expression, a look that anyone who truly knew him would recognize as dangerous. The line in the sand had been drawn, and Darren Winters had just deliberately stepped across it. The notices began appearing on our mailbox with alarming regularity. Each was printed on official Sycamore Heights HOA letterhead, detailing alleged violations and demanding immediate action. The most troubling part was not the demands themselves, but the audacity of the fines attached to each one. $250 fine for improper equipment storage, $500 fine for livestock odor abatement failure, $350 fine for unauthorized agricultural structures. The numbers kept climbing, totaling thousands in fabricated penalties for violations of rules that had no jurisdiction over our property. "They cannot possibly expect us to pay these," I said, adding the latest notice to our growing collection. "This has to be harassment." Grandpa examined the paper carefully. "This is not about money. This is about pressure. They want us to give in, to change our way of life to suit their vision." Our horses were the first to sense the increasing intrusions. Thunder, our prized quarter horse, began acting skittish whenever he was pastured near the eastern fence line. The other animals soon showed similar behavior, ears pricked, reluctant to approach certain areas of the fence, startling at sounds from the direction of Sycamore Heights. Concerned, I installed additional security cameras focused on our pastures and the areas where the horses seemed most agitated. The footage revealed the disturbing truth. Darren Winters was not just observing from the boundary. He was regularly crossing onto our property when he thought no one was watching. The cameras captured him slipping through the fence at different points, walking well onto our land to document what he considered violations. In one particularly infuriating clip, he approached our equipment barn, attempting to peer through windows and testing whether the door was locked. "This has gone too far," I told Grandpa, showing him the new footage. He is not just trespassing, he is actively invading our privacy. But the worst incident came on a clear Tuesday morning. I was in the main house when I heard a commotion from the eastern pasture, the panicked whinny of a horse in distress. Running outside, I saw Thunder galloping erratically across the field, his movements uncoordinated and frantic. By the time I reached him, he had collapsed near the water trough, his front leg held at an unnatural angle, breath coming in labored gasps. Moving quickly to secure him and prevent further injury, I called the veterinarian while Grandpa hurried from the workshop. Dr. Martinez arrived within 30 minutes, her experienced hands gentle as she examined Thunder's leg. "It is a serious injury," she confirmed, her expression grave. "Looks like he caught his leg in something while running in panic. This will require extensive treatment and a long recovery period." While she administered pain medication and stabilized the leg, I checked the security footage from the pasture cameras. What I saw made my blood run cold. Darren Winters had entered our property that morning, clipboard in hand. The timestamp showed him crossing the fence just 10 minutes before Thunder's injury. The footage clearly showed him walking through the pasture, waving his clipboard as he approached Thunder to document something on his perpetual violation list. The horse, startled by the stranger's aggressive movements, bolted in fear, catching his leg in an irrigation ditch while trying to escape. When I showed Grandpa the footage, something changed in his eyes. Thunder was more than livestock to us. He was family. The gentle giant had been with us for 12 years, a connection to my grandmother who had loved him dearly before she passed. "The vet bill?" Grandpa asked quietly. "Just over $4,000 for surgery and rehabilitation," I replied, "and no guarantee he will ever be the same." That evening, Grandpa drafted a formal cease and desist letter. It detailed every trespassing incident, documented with dates, times, and screenshots from our security system. It outlined the injury to Thunder and included Dr. Martinez's medical assessment directly connecting the injury to Darren's unauthorized entry. The letter demanded an immediate end to all trespassing, full compensation for veterinary expenses, and a written acknowledgement that our property was not subject to HOA regulations. "This should make our position absolutely clear," Grandpa said as he sealed the envelope. "We have been more than patient." Corinne Thompson's response arrived 3 days later. Rather than addressing our legitimate concerns, she escalated the conflict dramatically. "The Sycamore Heights HOA regrets that you have chosen a confrontational approach," her letter stated coldly. "Our community standards officer was performing his duties in documenting conditions that affect our residents. Your apparent failure to properly control your animals represents exactly the sort of safety hazard we have been concerned about. Should these unsafe and unsanitary conditions continue, we will have no choice but to file formal complaints with county animal control and zoning enforcement officials." The threat was unmistakable. They were attempting to use government authorities against us, potentially threatening our animals and our way of life. Grandpa read the letter twice, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he placed it carefully on the kitchen table and walked out to his workshop. Through the window, I watched as he turned on the lights and began pulling books from his old engineering shelves, technical manuals and reference texts he had not touched in years. "They have no idea who they are dealing with," I thought, recognizing the methodical precision with which my grandfather approached problems that truly angered him. "The quiet ones," I remembered my grandmother saying, "are the ones you need to watch most carefully when finally provoked." The sound of engines roused me early the next Monday morning, not the familiar rumble of our own tractor, but the high-pitched whine of commercial lawn equipment. Pulling back the curtains, I froze at the sight on our eastern property boundary. 3 trucks bearing the Evergreen Landscaping logo were parked along the fence line. Men in matching green uniforms were unloading equipment and crossing onto our property. I threw on clothes and raced outside, Grandpa emerging from the workshop at the same moment. By the time we reached them, the damage had already begun. A section of our heritage vegetable garden, plants my grandfather had cultivated from seeds passed down through generations, lay in ruins. The workers were methodically clearing what they called overgrowth, destroying irreplaceable heirloom varieties in the process. "What do you think you are doing on our property?" Grandpa demanded, his voice carrying across the field with unusual force. The workers paused, looking confused. A foreman stepped forward, consulting a work order on his clipboard. "Sycamore Heights HOA contracted us for perimeter beautification. We are supposed to clear 50 feet in from the boundary and implement approved landscaping." "This is private property," I said. "You have no permission to be here. That garden you just destroyed has been in our family for decades." The foreman frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, we are just following the work order. It says this area needs to meet community standards. They told us the owners had been notified." "We were not notified, and we certainly did not give permission," Grandpa said, his voice dangerously calm. "I would suggest you contact your client immediately." While the foreman made a phone call, I surveyed the destruction with growing dismay. The herb garden my grandmother had planted, rosemary, sage, and thyme that had flourished for years, was now just churned soil. Tomato plants heavy with nearly ripe fruit lay uprooted and wilting in the morning sun. The careful irrigation system Grandpa had designed was broken in multiple places, water pooling uselessly on the ground. 20 minutes later, a familiar vehicle pulled up alongside the landscaping trucks. Darren Winters emerged, clipboard in hand as always, his khaki uniform freshly pressed. Corinne Thompson followed, her high heels entirely impractical for the rural setting. "Mr. Callahan," she began without preamble, "there appears to be some confusion. The HOA board approved this landscaping intervention as part of our community beautification initiative." "There is no confusion," Grandpa replied. "You have authorized workers to trespass on private property and destroy personal property. That is criminal." Darren stepped forward, assuming what he probably thought was an authoritative stance. "Your unkempt property line has been deemed a significant detraction from community aesthetics. Multiple notices were provided requesting voluntary compliance." "Notices with no legal standing," I interjected. "This is not HOA property." "The board disagrees with your assessment," Corinne said smoothly. "Our legal counsel advises that community standards enforcement extends to adjacent properties when impact on home values can be demonstrated." Grandpa's face flushed with anger. "Your legal counsel is mistaken. Now remove your people from my property immediately, or I will call the sheriff and have them charged with criminal trespassing and destruction of property." Darren smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "The sheriff is unlikely to side with you on this matter. We have established relationships with local officials who understand the importance of community standards enforcing." "NT." It was a veiled threat, suggesting they had influence with local authorities that would override our legitimate property rights. Whether true or not, the implication was clear. "Your eyesore of a ranch has been devaluing properties in Sycamore Heights since we broke ground," Darren continued, emboldened by Corinne's presence. "The board has been more than patient. This professional intervention is long overdue." What followed was a heated exchange that grew increasingly personal. Darren criticized everything from our dilapidated structures to our primitive agricultural practices. When Grandpa pointed out that our farm predated their development by generations, Darren laughed dismissively. "Times change," he said. "Progress happens. Your outdated lifestyle does not fit with the modern community Sycamore Heights represents." The workers stood awkwardly throughout this confrontation, clearly uncomfortable being caught in the middle. The foreman finally announced they would cease work pending resolution of the property dispute, though the damage already done was considerable. As Corinne and Darren finally departed, Darren turned back with a parting shot. "This is happening one way or another. I will be back tomorrow to document additional violations. Your compliance is not optional." Grandpa said nothing as the vehicles pulled away, his expression unreadable. But I knew him well enough to recognize that something fundamental had shifted. The destruction of my grandmother's garden, something he had tenderly maintained since her passing, was not a trespass he would forgive easily. That evening, I found him in his workshop, surrounded by engineering textbooks, circuit diagrams, and electrical components. His drafting table was covered with schematics and calculations. Decades ago, before retiring to run the ranch full-time, Robert Callahan had been a respected electrical engineer specializing in industrial systems design. Those skills had lain dormant for years, used only for practical ranch maintenance. But now, under the soft glow of his work lamp, I could see the old precision and focus had returned. "What are you working on?" I asked, approaching cautiously. Grandpa did not look up from his diagram. "They believe their arbitrary rules override our legal property rights. They believe their authority extends beyond their boundaries." His pencil moved with practiced confidence across the paper. "Some people need a tangible reminder about respecting boundaries." He gestured to a book open on the workbench. "Agricultural Security Systems, Practical Applications." A page on electric fencing was marked with a yellow sticky note. "There are rules in this world older than any HOA," he said quietly, a hint of his old engineering precision in his voice. "One of them is about respecting boundaries." I watched as his weathered fingers traced along a circuit design, a slow smile forming on his face. In that moment, I recognized something I had not seen in years. My grandfather, the engineer, was back, and he was designing something special for Darren Winters. "I think it is time we upgraded our security measures," he said, meeting my eyes. "Something that sends a clear message about trespassing." The next morning, Grandpa outlined his plan over breakfast. His eyes carried a clarity and purpose I had not seen in years, the retired engineer fully reawakened. "Electric fencing is completely legal on agricultural property," he explained, spreading diagrams across the kitchen table. "Most ranchers use it simply to contain livestock, but its original purpose was security, keeping unwanted visitors out." I studied the schematics with growing appreciation for my grandfather's expertise. What he proposed was not a simple store-bought electric fence system, but a customized security solution tailored to our specific situation. "Will it be dangerous?" I asked, concerned about potential liability. Grandpa shook his head. "That is the beauty of proper engineering. This system will deliver a shock that is surprising and uncomfortable but causes no lasting harm. 5,000 volts sounds intimidating, but with extremely low amperage it is safe, just memorable." Before proceeding, we researched county regulations thoroughly. Agricultural electric fencing was explicitly permitted under local ordinances, provided appropriate warning signs were posted. The legal requirements were clear: signs every 50 feet along the electrified sections, proper grounding to prevent dangerous conditions, and voltage limits that we would stay well within. "We will do this by the book," Grandpa insisted. "Everything documented, everything compliant. When they complain, and they will, we need to be unassailable." The next week transformed Grandpa's workshop into what looked like a laboratory from another era. Spools of specialized wire, voltage meters, circuit boards, and insulating materials covered every surface. His engineering tools, some untouched for years, emerged from storage boxes, precision multimeters, specialized soldering equipment, and testing devices I had never seen him use. Grandpa worked with methodical precision, testing each component before incorporation into the larger system. He designed a sophisticated circuit that would activate only when someone attempted to climb or cut the fence, not when simply touched accidentally. This selective triggering mechanism was his proudest innovation. "The fence will remain passive until someone tries to cross it," he explained, demonstrating with a test circuit. "Just touching it while standing on the ground will do nothing, but try to climb over." He completed the circuit with a testing tool, causing an indicator light to flash. "That is when our trespasser receives his education." I helped gather materials and assisted with installation, learning more about electrical engineering in those days than I had my entire life. We focused our efforts on the eastern boundary facing Sycamore Heights, particularly the sections where Darren's footprints had most frequently been found. "Every system needs proper warning," Grandpa said as we installed bright red signs along the fence line. "Warning, electric fence," read each sign in bold letters, with smaller text detailing voltage information and safety warnings. We placed them every 30 feet, more frequently than legally required. "No one can claim they were not warned," I noted as we secured the last sign. "Exactly," Grandpa replied. "This is not about hiding anything. It is about establishing clear boundaries with clear consequences." The technical aspects of the installation were impressive. Weatherproof connections protected the system from the elements. Solar panels with battery backup ensured continuous operation regardless of power conditions. Tamper-resistant control boxes housed the electronic components. But perhaps the most ingenious element was the monitoring system. Grandpa integrated sensors that would not only trigger the electric pulse, but also activate our security cameras if anyone attempted to cross the fence. Any trespassing attempt would be thoroughly documented from multiple angles. "Knowledge is power," Grandpa said as we installed the final camera. "If they challenge us, we will have irrefutable evidence of their actions." On the final day of installation, we tested the system thoroughly, confirming voltage levels and safety features. Using insulated tools and protective equipment, Grandpa demonstrated how the circuit would complete only under specific circumstances, when someone attempted to climb over or cut through. "This is not about revenge," he explained, connecting the final wires to the control panel. "It is about boundaries and consequences. Everyone understands electricity. It is consistent, impartial, and immediate." As a final precaution, we notified the county sheriff's department about our new security measures. We submitted documentation of the repeated trespassing incidents, the damage to our garden, and the threatening behavior from the HOA representatives. We explained that we had installed standard agricultural electric fencing as permitted by county ordinance, with all required safety measures and signage in place. The deputy who took our report seemed sympathetic. "Just make sure everything is up to code," she advised, "and keep documenting any further incidents." As the sun set behind us that evening, casting long shadows across our property. Grandpa and I stood at the fence line looking toward Sycamore Heights. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders seemed relaxed, the burden of constant intrusions temporarily lifted. "The beauty of electricity," he said with quiet satisfaction, "is that it does not discriminate. It does not care about HOA badges or authority. It simply responds when a line is crossed." In that moment, I understood what he had created was more than a security system. It was a physical manifestation of a principle, that boundaries must be respected, that actions have consequences, and that sometimes those consequences need to be felt to be truly understood. "Now we wait," Grandpa said, turning back toward the house. "Not if, but when." We both knew it was only a matter of time before Darren Winters would test our new boundary enforcement system. 3 days passed with no sign of Darren Winters. The eastern boundary of our property remained undisturbed, our new security measures apparently serving as an effective deterrent. But we were under no illusion that the conflict had ended. "They are regrouping," Grandpa observed as we checked the system on the third evening, "planning their next move." He was right. That night, our motion-activated alerts pinged my phone. Accessing the security camera feed, I watched as a familiar figure approached our fence line under cover of darkness. Darren Winters moved with the confidence of someone who believed rules existed for Oz. "RS." His flashlight beam swept along our fence, pausing at each warning sign. I woke Grandpa, and together we watched the live feed as Darren inspected our security upgrades. He spent nearly 20 minutes examining the fence, occasionally speaking into his phone. Though we could not hear his words, his gestures toward our warning signs suggested he was reporting back to someone, likely Corinne Thompson. "He is gathering information," Grandpa said. "Reconnaissance before they decide how to respond." The next morning brought confirmation. A certified letter arrived from Sycamore Heights HOA Legal Affairs Committee, demanding immediate removal of our hazardous and intimidating security measures. The letter claimed our electric fence posed an unreasonable danger to community members and violated neighborhood aesthetic standards. "They still do not understand that their standards have no authority here," I said, reading the letter aloud at breakfast. Grandpa seemed unconcerned. "They will learn, one way or another." 2 more days passed quietly. Then, shortly after dusk on Friday evening, our security system alerted us again. Darren had returned, but this time he carried more than just his clipboard. A professional camera with a telephoto lens hung around his neck, and he moved with purpose toward our fence line. We watched on the monitor as he photographed our warning signs, the solar power units, and various components of the fence system. His actions were deliberate, clearly documenting what the HOA perceived as violations. Occasionally, he would speak into a small recorder, presumably noting his observations for an official report. After nearly 30 minutes of documentation, Darren approached one of his familiar crossing points, a section where he had previously climbed over our fence multiple times. Despite the prominent warning sign just 3 feet away, he tucked his camera into its case and reached for the top rail of the fence. "He is going to do it," I said in disbelief, "even with all the warnings." "Some people need to experience consequences firsthand," Grandpa replied quietly, his eyes never leaving the monitor. Time seemed to slow as Darren hoisted himself up, placing one foot on the lower rail and gripping the top wire with both hands as he had done many times before. The moment his body weight pulled against the top wire, completing the circuit, the system performed exactly as designed. The shock was not dangerous. Grandpa had engineered it precisely, but it was certainly effective. Darren's body went momentarily rigid, his expression transforming from smug confidence to complete surprise in an instant. He tumbled backward, landing unceremoniously in the dirt on the Sycamore Heights side of the fence. Our multiple camera angles captured every detail of his reaction. The initial shock, the undignified fall, and most satisfyingly, the moment of realization as he scrambled to his feet, frantically brushing dirt from his precious uniform. His expression cycled through pain, disbelief, outrage, and finally, embarrassment as he looked around to see if anyone had witnessed his humiliation. The small red indicator lights on our cameras were barely visible in the growing darkness, and Darren seemed unaware that his entire encounter had been recorded in high definition from multiple angles. He retrieved his camera case from where it had fallen, checking the equipment for damage before backing away from the fence with new respect for the warning signs. As he limped back toward the subdivision, occasionally glancing back at our property with a mixture of shock and indignation, Grandpa chuckled softly beside me. "Some lessons," he murmured, "have to be felt to be understood." We reviewed the footage several times, making sure to save multiple copies securely. The system had worked precisely as designed, delivering a memorable but harmless lesson about respecting boundaries. Darren had received a shock that caused no injury but would certainly not be forgotten. "Do you think he will report this?" I asked. "Without question," Grandpa replied. "But now we have him on video ignoring clearly posted warnings and trespassing despite our security measures. Everything is documented, everything legal." That night, we slept more soundly than we had in weeks. Our property line was finally being taken seriously. Whether Darren had learned his lesson remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: he would think twice before climbing our fence again. The eastern pasture remained peaceful through the night. Even Thunder, still recovering from his injury, seemed more at ease. Perhaps animals, with their instinctive understanding of territory and boundaries, appreciated what we had done more than the humans who had necessitated it. The HOA's response came swiftly and aggressively. 2 days after Darren's shocking encounter, a formal complaint arrived from the Sycamore Heights legal team addressed to NTY officials. The document described our electric fence as an intentional hazardous condition and a malicious attractive nuisance designed to injure innocent community members. "They are trying to portray themselves as victims," I noted as we reviewed the complaint. "No mention of the trespassing or property damage they caused." Grandpa seemed untroubled by the escalation. "I expected nothing less, but we are prepared." When the county inspector arrived the following morning, a serious-looking woman with a clipboard and measuring tools, I felt a momentary anxiety. Her official vehicle and brisk manner suggested she was not someone who made exceptions easily. "I am here regarding a complaint about an electric fence installation," she announced. "I will need to inspect the system and verify compliance with county ordinances." Grandpa welcomed her professionally. "Of course. We have all documentation ready for your review. The system was installed in accordance with Section 14.3 of the County Agricultural Code." For the next hour, Inspector Reynolds methodically examined every aspect of our fence system. She measured the voltage with her own equipment, checked the signage placement and visibility, and reviewed our installation documentation. Grandpa walked alongside her, answering technical questions with the precision of the engineer he had once been. "Your voltage is well within agricultural standards," she noted, making entries on her clipboard, "and your signage exceeds the minimum requirements." She paused at the section where Darren had received his education. This appears to be the area mentioned in the complaint. Grandpa nodded. We have video documentation you might find relevant. Back at the house, we presented Inspector Reynolds with our comprehensive evidence package.